Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Nina Ha, and I'm the director of the APIDA Center. We are really excited to have really special guests today for our learning lunch for April. And learning lunches are usually a time, sort of an informal time or gathering where people from the community can learn about either APIDA faculty on this campus or about the community members who we've had a number of community members, and we've actually extended about their personal and professional journeys into whatever field they are in. It also gives us space for students to network and get to know people, and vice versa for you all to get to know the Virginia Tech community as a whole as well. This month is APIDA Heritage Month. Usually we have AAPI in May, federally recognized. However, for the colleges and universities, it usually occurs in April. So we have a lot of events and programs. If you're interested, please reach out or join our listserv if you want to as well. But I'm just really, really excited to have you all here today, our special artists and guests. I think we've planned for quite a bit to do so. So I'm gonna hand the ball over to John.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nina. We really appreciate your hospitality and opening up this space to our guests. My name is John again. I work at the Moss Arts Center across the street. And this week we have the honor of welcoming artists associated with a project called Small Island Big Song while they're here in Virginia. It's also an honor to be a part of APIDA Heritage Month. I know there's a lot of programming going on. We're delighted that we're able to participate in that with you. A beautiful day outside. Just say as a side note, it's wonderful to have you here. So before we get started, I wanted to also thank, in addition, of course, thanking Nina, we so appreciate your hospitality. I wanted to thank Dr. Teresa Wilson, the assistant director here at the APIDA Center. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Melissa Faircloth at the Adiwaoki Indigenous Community Center. I'd like to thank Mid-Atlantic Arts, which is a grantor that has made it possible in part for us to welcome these artists here to Blacksburg. And lastly, of course, our guests, Bao, Tim, Irileke, and Maya, for making time to be with us. A little bit about the project. I know our time is limited, so I'll keep introductions brief. Small Island Big Song is a multifaceted project, a multimedia project. It's a film, it's a touring musical project. It's a form of climate activism and cultural ambassadorship, and it spans 16 island nations throughout the Indian and Pacific Oceans, as far west as Madagascar, as far east as Rapa Nui. This is a project in which Tim and Bao, as the co-producers of the project, traveled all throughout that region, quite an ambitious undertaking, to record music from some of the songkeepers within the indigenous communities across those 16 island nations as a way of documenting cultural traditions, raising a clarion call with regard to the effects of climate change as particularly experienced among the people resident on those islands, and to also illustrate the enduring connections and the seafaring legacy among the peoples of those different islands. So without further ado, I'd love to pass things off to Bao, Tim, Irileke, and Maya. Usually the way we initiate these conversations is by simply asking our guests to speak a little bit about how you got to where you are, be it your artistic journey, your professional journey, your personal journey, just something that maybe gives us a window into how you arrived at the project you're currently working on.
Sure, thanks, John. Yeah, thank you everyone for hosting us and having us here. Yeah, you go.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, John, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm Bao, one of the co-founders and producer and manager of Small Island Big Song. So my background, when I was in university, I studied business management, but I always had this feeling of, I'm not sure if I really fit into this conventional business sort of corporate world. So after I graduated from university, I went traveling around the world, like a gap year, backpacking. And when I went to Australia, I met Tim at my first job at a music festival. And we actually, the first project that we went together was going to Vanuatu. If you have a map, oh,
Winner.
Irie, can you help me Vanuatu there? We went there to make a documentary with the Banks Island of the Vanuatu. Yeah. And when we arrived there, the elder asked me, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Taiwan. And he said, my ancestors come from Taiwan. And at that time, I just had no idea. I just said, do you know where Taiwan is? It's not Thailand, you know. It's very far away from Vanuatu. And then so he ended up sharing with us the seafaring heritage, like migration all across the Pacific and Indian Ocean. And that was actually the first time I heard about this connection.
You got to have a moment, take this in, take this in. Yeah, like when we heard this, it was just like, what? Like, this is such an incredible like moment in history, like a story that, you know, from Taiwan, did you say? People spread out from Taiwan.
On the outrigger canoes. So down to the Philippines and Malaysia, Indonesia, and then cross the Pacific, like Hawaii, Rapa Nui, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and also cross the Indian Ocean to Madagascar. So we had, after hearing that, we went online and tried to find out more about it. And we knew there was some sort of like DNA research, language, even like the tapa clause, you know, the paper mulberry. There's a study on that. Actually, in Taiwan, there's the most diverse sort of DNA of that tree. And further it went, sort of got less and less. And when it gets to Rapa Nui, now it's only one type of paper mulberry tree. And it's just all these like different research we found just fascinating. But in the same time, there's not many musical or creative collaboration across this region. So when Tim and I, we also heard how climate change is affecting this region. Within 1 month, we decided to quit our jobs, and with about $3,000 between us, we started this journey, recording, filming with musicians across the region. And one of them was Irie. We went to Gaba Gaba to record and film with Irie. Yeah, that's in a nutshell.
So share now. Is it? Or
Well,
Irie, do you
Irie,
want-
yeah, Irie.
I don't. Yeah, so both Baba and Tim came to my village in Gaba Gaba. And yeah, so my name's Irie, like my village if you translate it to English means drum. So it's a drumming village. And yeah, I live in Australia. This is my daughter here.
And
She-
master drummer.
was born in Australia. So yeah, PNG, I don't know if many of you know about Papua New Guinea. Are there any PNG students at this place? No?
Mm.
Yeah, it's a long way to come. But yeah, basically we are a very diverse country. You know, we have over 1,000 languages on our island. It's the third largest island in the world. And we have the third largest tract of rainforest. So we have quite extreme biodiversity, cultural diversity on our island. Yeah, half of our island is Papua New Guinea, the other half, and that half is still colonized by Indonesia. Papua New Guinea is an independent country. So the drumming and the music that I've play and I grew up learning. It's traditional from our place. There's not much but it's not like our music hasn't really gone far around the world. It's still quite in its traditional form. I guess I'm probably the first or second generation of contemporary musicians who sort of use the culture, more expressive stuff. I grew up learning traditional music, of course, keeping up with our tradition. I taught my kids.
Sorry, yeah, hold on. Sorry, just, okay, thank you. Yeah, do back again. Other one. Other way. Okay, hold on. Is the light on?
Blinking at it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Again,
It's actually.
technology. Technology.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, can you try it again? It was on, no, it was on before, and then you turned it off.
I guess the owl's nocturnal.
What's wrong?
Eagle is up
Sorry. No, my computer's working now. Okay. There we go.
Popo, popo. That's the call in Australia. Owls, mate. Popo.
That's not.
Why isn't it working? Sorry, my bad. Technology.
Just,
Keep
just
going.
wait.
Okay, yes.
Focus.
Back on.
Okay,
We're back.
okay, we're back.
Yeah, it's staring at me.
Can we turn around?
It'll automatically.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, great.
do that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, anyway, that was
Yes.
me.
So,
Um,
Intergenerational story.
yeah, so in Small Island Big Song, I'm a percussionist. And also may have Joy here. Chicken.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you. I'm Mel. I do traditional drumming, and yeah.
What is traditional drumming? What sort of
Uh,
instruments?
Like log drums, from Papua New Guinea. My dad's been teaching me since I was very little. So, yeah.
And Maya just graduated from high school. She's only
Congratulations.
18.
Yeah, and at the show you wait, like your jaw will drop. This drumming, the sound of the drums, are just another world. Yeah, really, they really grab you. Really bad.
Thank you.
Hey, Tim, would you say a little bit about
Yeah.
what brought you to this project?
So, and myself, I'm Tim Cole. I'm from Australia. My professional background is in music production, filmmaking, across lots of different facets, and theatre. I love theatre, but also film soundtracks, recording albums for bands, making music videos, designing the visuals behind the concerts, running sound systems, and producing. And early on, I took a gap year because at my age, when I left school, no one advised you to take music. I was pushed in to go to graphic arts. If you have a creative bent, graphic arts pays, that's the way to go. But I took a gap year. I wanted to explore music. I joined a band. I went to all the recording studios in Melbourne. I said, can I just sit here and watch how recording is done? I got a radio show. And I got into Melbourne University the next year doing filmmaking, media course. And so both those careers kept growing, music during the night and sitting in studios and learning about filmmaking during the day. Then it was film, 16mm. And early on, I started working with Indigenous artists, Australian Indigenous artists. A performer called Archie Roach, I was his front of house mixer, and Bart Willoughby, when Mixed Relations came to Melbourne, I'd do that, bands are in it. And that led to me becoming a part of a band that went to Papua New Guinea. And then I really sort of loved this, working on cross-cultural projects, because there was all this skill of like the filmmaking, doing the visuals and being in the studio, being creative, working with creative people, but there was this whole other dimension about these songs and the instruments come from a lineage. There's this like deep perspective. And I know that my heritage coming from the recording, I love all that too, you know, the recording techniques, what the Beatles brought to music production and Western music, but also there was this whole other world. And pretty much that became my focus, picking up jobs like that. And one of the jobs Babo mentioned, I was offered to go to the Banks Islands in Vanuatu to produce. They said it would be an album, but when I got there, they said, you know, music albums are okay, but we want a DVD. Or a DVD, okay, why not? After some kava, actually, which is like, how to describe that? It's like a root from a tree that's been a stimulant. It inspires ideas. So I met, and sort of getting there. So I met Babo, and I'd just taken a job in Central Australia working at an Aboriginal recording studio. Actually Australia's first initiated, totally run, managed Aboriginal media house. They had a major recording studio in there and produced lots of films. They had this radio station that broadcast all through the desert communities in Australia, where culture in Australia, Indigenous Aboriginal culture, is actually still intact in all those communities. Languages first, their cultural structures are still all practiced. People have like skin names, this other sort of layer of community. And it was amazing to go out there and to record music, like in the field with all the musicians and elders of the communities, which sort of cuts the Babo and I were living there, and we really, when we heard that IPCC report, it just struck us that, you know, this is the call of our era. This is really the way we respond to what's happening in our global ecosystem, particularly now that we've entered the Anthropocene, which I'm sure everyone here understands that, you know, we share this one island, really. That's the theme of our project. And how could we bring that, put that issue into actually what resources we had, you know? And mine was simply being able to record music with musicians. And I had lots of contacts, such as Ari Lecky and other musicians in the Pacific and Australia, and Babo, extraordinary with managing actually finances and getting projects off the ground, and passion for theatre. So that's what we thought we could do. We can reach out to people like the people in Vanuatu who keep this, and Arileki, who keep the story, the culture, the musical lineage, the voice of their islands alive and relevant, like responding to a contemporary world. And then tied around this Austronesian heritage, which we'd heard from that trip to Vanuatu. But you look at this map here, and look, everything's got these colors. And look, there's Papua New Guinea, Papua, half of Papua is green, the other half is orange, and there's Australia's yellow. And I mean, of course, that's just all made up. And that's only recent. It's less than 100 years, a lot of this. Before that, we're speaking 5,000 years of like relationship to the earth and the ocean and the islands through culture, through the seafaring heritage, through voices like the two artists here bring, through their drumming. The drumming carries this knowledge, the patterns, the instruments themselves, which are made from the trees right there. We could talk about our relationship to the earth through simply going and working with artists that carry the story, and then bringing it to the most remote, distant places we could, like the Moss Arts Centre here at Virginia Tech, you know, to bring these voices here, sit around here talking on stage, engagements, and share this idea that we're all sharing one small island. And so that's how it all came together. So like me, from the colonizing side, you know, this white guy sitting here, but you know, this is the path I ended up doing, and And I thought, what can I really bring to this issue, and how can I create a space where artists can, I'm not get in the way and they have to stage, they'll undo a bit of colonization. Have fun. Manage climate anxiety a bit, but I feel like I'm doing something. Yeah. So that sort of gives a bit of shape.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the four of you taking the time to speak about your backgrounds and sort of what brought you to this very unique project, very ambitious project. I've got a host of questions, but I would love to first open things up if there are individuals after hearing those introductions. If you have questions for the artists, what might they be?
I'm just curious to hear what your most impactful story was that each of you have heard along this journey.
I would say when we started this project, it was really just the two of us. With little resources and money but now when we are actually touring on the road, like even yesterday we had 2 buses, come and pick us up, and I thought, oh, maybe it's a bit too many. But we have a group of we have a community now that sharing this journey together. And for me as a producer, I love that. I think that's, for me, bringing people together, bridging people for a purpose. That's something I really love. And like last year, we're actually invited by the UN to perform at COP28. And we're the only performing arts group that was actually invited to
By the
perform.
organizers, yeah.
And I remember walking around the different pavilions and just seeing, different, I don't know, negotiations and policy makings, and I just feel, wow, arts and culture are just so they're not on the table when they have these conversations. And I also talked to a lot of people that came to see our show. They feel, at this climate sector, there should be more sharing of actually like lived experience, and these can be done through touring like this, through performance, through education, lots of different ways. And for me, it was sort of an insurance after COP that, yeah, this is the path we should be working on as well. Yeah.
Good question. I think that I read a little bit about you, that you have musicians from all over, right? That like come and go in but can you describe what the format is of all of these different performances and like where you're traveling to? Do you also go to the islands, or is it mostly the people who don't live on islands? Or can you just tell us a little bit about how it works?
Yeah, it's so, yeah, like we really see like it's an ensemble of artists. I mean, it's such a vast region. Originally, Babo and I, we had contacts in Indigenous Taiwan artists and artists I knew in Papua New Guinea, like Aruleke, and we thought, wow, this would be really powerful. But it's a much bigger picture. And we had to sort of, okay, $3,000, but yeah, we had pictured, Hawaii and Rapa Nui style. Madagascar, for me, it was just a cartoon. My ignorance, I knew so little. But we started going out to meet people, industry events, researching. And so for the first phase of the project, it was really going to meet people on their islands to tell these stories from, like, the source in a sense, but to go and work with people where their culture is formed and shaped, where languages are shaped from environments and instruments and culturally. So we did meet with a lot of people, mostly professional artists who are managing their careers and have albums out, busy session musicians. So we could then have this roster of artists that, because everyone's got their own lives as well, that we can bring together and keep expanding always. So we have shapes, so the shape of the theatrical experience, our island, so people can move in and out of it. And it still has this structure. It's very collaborative. We begin with maybe 5 days of rehearsals and everyone brings a song. Some members have been touring already, so there's a starting point. And it's all written, all the visuals we created, a lot of it first. Does that answer everything there? And it's always expanding new ideas. We're imagining the next phase of the project now. What more can we do from this point? What can we bring to this issue? And now with this busload of extraordinary creatives. That help?
Do you want to share?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would say as one of the musicians, we are all of us specialize in what we do, and we're very different. Like one of the biggest challenges probably for us two was learning the Mauritius and the Madagascar music. The feel and the tempo is very different to how we. And I taught a song that we grew up singing. It's a traditional song, and I have that's the song I brought. And after a couple of weeks, Emmeline, the Mauritius artist, came back with her version of it. It was like a Sega feel. And I tried playing it. I was just like, it was like this kind of, like, how do you hear it like that? And it took me quite some time to feel it how she was feeling it. And I think music is one of those rare art forms where it requires you to have empathy in a musical sense. And you really have to feel it how they feel it in order to understand it. So it's like you bring something, another person brings something, and we create a third thing together. And the thing we create together, that's what we're all really invested in. It's not just our own sharing our own thing, but it's what we create together. I think that's the beautiful thing about music, when you collaborate. Yeah.
Other questions, folks have?
I always find it interesting about place and what you learn about yourselves when you go to different spaces. So could you please share like where some places that you've been that really have impacted you or inspired you or made you sort of kind of maybe sometimes depressed as well? Like what places, how do places and geography shape identities as well?
I might just quickly go first over that first question too, adding to that about like the experience of going to a lot of these places. Yeah, and we saw firsthand a lot of, you can see firsthand the impacts of climate change everywhere. Well, it's the coastline here too. And there was, a little bit Baba and I thinking, what can we bring to this issue by going to work with these people? A little bit like they're victims of this. And that was challenged when we got there, where they're also the people are like proud and in control of culture, and this attitude that not victimhood, of like a love, like of standing up for, of power too for these places. And that's why a lot of those songs are really uplifting. They're in it filmed and the songs themselves are really about the power of culture. And yeah, so that's one thing that changed me, my attitudes.
Other thoughts on places that maybe been a source of inspiration over the course of this project, considering how broad the geography has been?
Yeah, I think one thing we all have in common is nature is a big inspiration for the songs. Everybody shares something from the island, and everybody has a song related to ocean, or, living that lifestyle, living off the sea. And it is a delicate balance. That's one thing we all have realized now. It's just what we took for granted, how vulnerable and delicate it actually is. And because we see it now, like in our village in Kabagaba, we were there just before we came to America. And the ocean is like very, like we've felt it. I've never felt it that hot before, like just swimming on the beach. It's really hot. And things like jellyfish now, there's a lot more jellyfish because they like the warmer water. And there are other species of jellyfish that are in like Australia and Darwin, where the most venomous creatures on the planet. And so it's like, I'm, also feeling up. I hope those don't come this direction because the temperature now is perfect for them. And so there's little things that, not little, it's a big thing. And our reefs, I remember when I was small, swimming in the reefs in our village, and it was how vibrant and colorful they were. And now a lot of them are bleached. They're dead. And so the reefs, but fortunately we have massive reefs. And so there's still life there, of course. But it's certainly, you can see it, the fishermen now, they go further out. And in a country like Papua New Guinea, it's very, tribalism is very, very rich, raw. It's like I believe, indigenous sovereignty, how you don't purchase land, you inherit it from your ancestry. I think that system of tribal ownership, I think we took for granted how important that is. Because now, you have to own land, you have to have debt. And that whole system of, I also own land both ways. Yeah. So, having a mortgage, having to pay a loan back, that kind of lifestyle. I think what happened with colonization, they tried to sever the relationship of human to land and introduce the concept of real estate. That's what colonization was about.
Mhm.
And so that you no longer should inherit your land from your ancestry, purchase it. And that shifted everything for us, for everyone, I think. And so that relationship to land is what I think the music and the songs, we represent that. And so we always try to share. That's why I think sharing those common stories, what experiences you had with your grandfather or mom or dad going out fishing, they might seem trivial, but they're critical to relationship and identity. Like you're asking about identity and place. So I think it's not just tribal identities, identity as a human being, which is everybody, how we relate to each other. It's maybe a bit more challenging when you live in a city because you can't, we're here and we all have our industrialized identity, like your job, your role, you're a student, I'm a musician, and we sort of get into this machine and we can lose focus of true identity and relationship to the Mother Earth and spirit with each other. So music is sort of that container that holds all of that.
Yay. Yeah, that's our perspective. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's something wrong with our dominant Western culture, our industry. Like the earth really is suffering, but we're not acting full gusto. What can we bring to that as music producers, theatre producers?
I found there's just a little thing, sometimes climate change seems like big, you can't do anything about it. And it's somebody else's job to fix it. We also have other, bad, probably things we need to change with our mentality as sort of village people. We have in PNG, we have this sort of cargo cult mentality where someone else is going to come and save us. Or someone going to come and fix our problem. And my people in our village, we talk about climate change, but then one of the worst things we have is this polystyrene. Sorry, but plastic. So little things we can do, we can all do. You can go shopping and refuse a plastic bag. Because, vigilante consumerism is powerful. You have a choice, if everybody start making different choices, different decisions, it impacts the demand for the products. And I think that's Vanuatu. If you want to like do some research, Vanuatu is a very important country to pay attention to. I think. Ralph Reagan Vanu, especially, he's the climate change minister in Vanuatu. They're the first country in the world to outlaw single-use plastics. No plastic bags, no straws, no cutlery from plastic. So yeah, he's a very interesting guy, Ralph Reagan, and Vanuatu especially. And that goes back to, I think Tim was talking about it earlier. Vanuatu have, because it's a small country, their tribal systems of governance are still very influential. So they have the Council of Chiefs, who are the traditional landowners, and their tribal chiefdom system is still strong. And they also have a very influential level of parliament. And so it kind of holds the political leaders more accountable to community. So yeah, I would recommend, if you're interested in climate change, to pay attention to Vanuatu.
Yeah,
A very
on a
powerful country.
global international level, like
Mhm.
lobbying the UN recently to acknowledge money and supporting adaptation and resilience, but also on a grassroots level. We were there on a remote island, Motor Lava, and the government been there and working with the community, because the crop seasons, their planting's changing, how they can adapt. And so they're really big picture, the way they're addressing both levels.
And advocates for drinking kava. Highly recommend.
I'm really fascinated by how the project has kind of morphed from your original idea, or maybe morph's the wrong word, like become more expansive. In terms of certainly incorporation of the creation of film, the audio recordings, eventually the tour. So individuals, community by community, get an opportunity to meet the song keepers and the individuals who can speak to the lived experience of climate change, as well as the culture that's been passed down for generations. I'd love to hear, and I don't know how easy it would be to answer this question, but what does success look like for you on a project like this that's so unique?
This tour was one thing. Yeah. It was a goal we had to bring these stories and to the US, to Europe, and here we are doing it,
I think for me, thinking about the question about place, but for me, it's always about human. It's about the person. And every time when we go visit a place, for us, it's actually the biggest impact is to meet the person that can take us to understand the place, the environment that they live. So, for example, with Sammy from Madagascar, that, if you come to see our concert, you'll meet him. He was one of the first musicians that we went visit in 2016. And he took us around Madagascar for a road trip, like 2-3 weeks, to understand, where does his inspiration come from? Where does he live, and his family and his culture. And by knowing him, we felt, wow, if we can meet other musicians like that from other islands, and bring them together, that would be a really powerful thing. Because a lot of the musicians, like Sammy, I remember him saying one thing, that he said, we all reach. But when I say reach, it's not the financial reach, is we know what to pass down to our next generation. And him being, so passionate about his music, his traditional music, for 40-50 years, really inspired the rest of us that there's there's a pathway and there's a value in actually, focusing on what you believe in. And we actually went back to Madagascar the year after just to see him again, just to work with him more. So I think, yeah, for me, the success, back to your question, is to support the people that I just respect so much. And I know there's a lot of challenges as well, everyone has a lot of differences. And as a group, just like many other groups, we have different opinions and things, but I think a group is the strongest when we have a huge diversity, but a common center. So every time when we see different things differently, we always go back to why we're doing this. And if that center is holding strong, then for me, that's a success.
Beautiful, thank you.
Mm.
Other questions?
So thank you guys for talking. About you had talked about like you went at COP 28 and then you like didn't see many like the role of arts and culture and policy making and yeah, I just am curious to hear about like you talk about that more a little bit and like thinking through how can like arts and culture play a bigger role in shaping policy and how it can kind of bring alternative like imaginaries that can yeah, like shape policy better. I don't know, just how can it gain more like reputability in those spaces that are so influential and like, yeah, I'm just curious. I don't really have a specific question. That's the general intersection.
It was the reason we were when we were invited to perform at COP, we're actually there to open the launch of a collective called Planetary Guardians. And that collective is formed by a lot of climate leaders like Jen Goodall, Mary Robinson, Sylvia L, and many other people. And we were there to sort of open the launch for them. And I will say, when you talk about like art and culture, I think the main reason like art and culture is not really in the climate talk is because how do I put this? Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
It's interesting though, because we have been through this tour, we've been engaging with scientists and researchers, and they're really interested to find new ways to express and model research. And our last engagement in Raleigh, we had this extraordinary workshop where we broke up into groups around what practice we could bring, art practice like drumming and music and dance and visual art and management. How can we relook at like research and study, but from these perspectives? So we were writing songs while these researchers were doing their research over songs, or we were playing them and weaving that in and just trying to unpack and make it fluid and see how we can. And our music too, there's some songs we actually reach out to researchers who are, say, studying choral acoustics, and we'll bring that into a song, from a healthy reef to a bleached coral reef. Culture and shifting cultures.
I remember being at COP, I had this feeling like there's a lot of people trying to respond to this issue, and that's the scientists, the politician, and there's a lot of numbers you know, out there in the media and some often it's very hard for people to relate. But the artists, we do play a role that actually talk to people's hearts rather than, you know, the brain. And when I was like walking around COP, I feel, wow, we know the solutions. There's so many solutions out there, but why people are not responding to that? And I think art can actually play a role in motivating people and activating people. And that's, yeah.
There's, I remember one thing I heard that was, he goes, music can't really change the world, but it can change people. And people change the world.
Yeah, yeah.
So as far as policymakers go, I think generally speaking, like governments and policymakers do a better job of provoking music rather than making it happen. But it's also up to, I think, arts companies like Small Island Big Song. I also have other projects which are more activist based. We have to be more strategic with how we use our art and how we engage with institutions, especially state institutions. That's one of the most powerful things art can do, is work with allies within state institutions and pull them towards being more active allies rather than passive allies or active opponents. And I think art can do that. You start with your allies and then you start shifting state institutions until eventually they're the pillars that hold it up. And eventually pull enough of them across to be active allies. Then that's when you get cultural change. But I think that upwards pressure is what arts can do. It popularizes a message. And you know, policymakers that's their soft spot. Especially in this country, I guess.
Could you speak a bit about, be it in Small Island Big Song or some of the other projects that you alluded to, the strategies that you felt like you needed to employ when you've come up against, as you put it, active opposition?
Yeah, I also am an activist, I guess, for West Papua, which is the other half of our island. The island that's red or orange, I come from the green side. So this was all Dutch colony. And New Guinea was the top half, and that was colonized by Germany. And the bottom bit was Papua, that was colonized by the British. So the Dutch, the German, and the British split this island free. So when Germany lost World War One, they lost all their colonies. So they created Papua New Guinea, and it was under Australian administration. The Indonesians kicked the Dutch out in the 40s also, and then Indonesia assumed control. But they prepped West Papua for independence because it was obviously a Pacific country, it wasn't an Asian country, it wasn't Indonesia. And so they launched all their iconologies, this flag, the Morning Star flag, the anthem, all the iconologies and judiciary system was all launched on December 1 in 1962. And in 19 days later, Indonesia invaded and they took it. So the biggest gold mine, maybe the second biggest gold mine on earth is here. So probably bits of all of your planes come from West Papua. It's Freeport, American gold mine. So as an activist, I started a band. It's called Sorong Samurai. Sorong is a town on the tip of here, and Samurai is down here. So we have a saying that says Sorong Samurai, and it basically talks about the unification of our island, which of course is speaking of decolonization. So Australia is quite involved in that. It kept it as a dark secret until social media. And Australia was quite involved in Indonesia assuming control. They had a referendum. The Indonesians called it the act of free choice, but we call it the act of no choice because they handpicked 1,000 people and sort of under intimidation, they all voted unanimously to stay under Indonesian control. And Australia, America, and the Dutch were probably the three most powerful Western countries involved in it. And so they kind of just let it go. It wasn't worth the fight, they said. And so we've been, fighting for the independence of the start. Self-determination ever since. We have a movement, it's called Rise of the Morning Star. The Morning Star is the flag of West Papua. And so we use music and art. So what I did, we do many things, concerts, we're a record label, we are a campaign. But one thing we did was we engaged as curators. I'm a bit similar to Tim in that I'm also a producer, curator. And so I got places like the Sydney Opera House, Art Centre Melbourne, Sydney My Music Bowl, friends who also happen to be like big name musicians. Started with all our friends, our rock stars, like, we're gonna put a show on, you want to come to it? And next minute, years later, it's quite pop. It's like commercial, like you've got rappers rapping about it. Then you'll find freedom songs all over the Pacific now, singing for West Papua. There's film festival touring Australia right now, which our bass player is sort of running. And interestingly, I became a bit of a, I guess, apart from that, that's a Papua New Guinean DFAT, which is like our foreign affairs department. They kind of got Australia's foreign affairs department. I used to curate events for them. And so I was kind of like Trojan horse technique. So we got in there. And so we were doing these big shows, creating television shows, sponsored by DFAT with West Papua messaging and music. Because one of the foundational things that is common, even with the opposition, was the freedom of expression. So that's the key that we hold is commitment to democracy, commitment to freedom of expression. And so we grow it from there. I think that was the strategy we had to. We did many things that didn't work.
Sure.
But then that one, I guess we did put a bit of upwards pressure. Papua New Guinea was, of course, it shares the border with Indonesia. And I think it's quite relevant to this project too. That we had another West Papuan dancer came, he's gone back now, but he was part of this tour. Because the traditional owners are around this whole island. This is the third largest tract of rainforest on Earth. We are the custodians of that. I mean, that's the lungs of the planet. There's here the Amazon and Congo. So these are the three biggest rainforests. And there's a lot of illegal logging happening. In this area here, it's called Merauke. There's a campaign called MIFE, M-I-F-E-E. And this is the largest land grab that's happened in the Pacific, where the Indonesian government gave it to the Bin Laden family. It's a Saudi Arabia's food security. So one of the biggest palm oil plantations on earth is here. And they leveled this crazy amounts of rainforest for palm oil. And most of the products we have in our food come from this palm oil. Chips like, what do you call it? Crisps. Yeah. A lot of that is palm oil. So, it's it's like a consumer thing you can do, like usually check. They're sneaky though, like they just call it vegetable oil. But a lot of it, generally that means it's palm oil. And that's the biggest palm oil plantation of it. Yeah, so I don't know.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, we have about a minute left. So I want to make sure if there's anyone else who has questions, they have the opportunity to do so. Or recommendations. Well, our guests are in Blacksburg, things not to miss, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to thank.
Share what artists we have on tour.
Yeah,
with
that would be
and-
great. Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
Yeah, sure.
That's the map.
Mhm.
Irene, you're the closest.
So we mentioned Sammy, who's one of the first artists that Baba and I met on this creative adventure we took. So Sammy will be here and with all these instruments from Madagascar, some songs. Nearby Madagascar in the Indian Ocean, Mauritius.
Yeah,
And there are two artists from Mauritius, a musician, Emlyn, and she is like the new wave of young Mauritians, like owning the traditional Sega, but in its original form, back to the original instruments, the maravan, the ravan, a big frame drum, triangle, and of course the process, it's an ensemble, so everyone has to learn each other's music. So it's Ari, Lecky and Mia learning the Sega rhythms and then across to Papua New Guinea. We have a big entourage from Papua New Guinea. Ari, Lecky, Mia, and amazing Lizati, Richard Mogu. He's been a long-term musical companion and partner with Ari Lecky, but Richard is just a real master of all of Papua New Guinea's like traditional instruments, and particularly Ari too, the kukumba flute. Yes, this beautiful bamboo flute, log drums. He brings some extraordinary songs to the show. One is, wow, this really deep sort of spiritual place he'll take you to. And then Taiwan, because this Austronesian seafaring heritage, everyone shares this link to Taiwan before the earth became all colored patterns like that, thousands of years ago. Taiwan wasn't even called Taiwan, of course, who knows? And the Yuma is from the Adao people from the mountain regions of Taiwan. Yeah. And then you'll meet lots of all these places on the film that we shot actually with them on their islands and in the mountains of Taiwan. Yeah.
Well, I realized I didn't mention when the concert's happening. You gotta check it out tomorrow night at the Moss Arts Center at 7:30 p.m.
No, the day after.
Day after, my goodness. Wednesday.
We have a set-up day.
Wednesday night.
Yeah.
At the Moss Arts Center, 7:30 p.m. We would love to have you there. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to ask me, our guest artist, but otherwise I just want to make. Oh, and yes, and tomorrow night, we have a panel with some members of Small Island Big Song alongside researchers here at Virginia Tech, a geoscientist and a geographer, who are going to be talking about climate change, responses to climate change from the perspective of science and art. So to your question earlier, we're really looking to intentionally explore what we have to learn from one another as we think about strategies to address this particular issue. So I want to thank you again for being here. I wish you the best as the semester goes on, and hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow night or Wednesday night, or both.
Yes, thank you so much again.
Oh, and the other person from Mauritius is Matthew, you gotta dance it, but something else. Believe me, one of the most impressive, strongest dancers I've ever seen. And musician too.